Hey guys, welcome back to World of Warships. Today we get to look at a brand new ship, the Brennus. This is a French tier 10 heavy cruiser that's going to be available for research points. So in the research bureau, you're going to be able to get this thing for 60,000 research points, which is not easy to get. That is a lot of grinding you have to do, or a lot of free XP spent. So what is this ship going to do, and is it worth picking up? That's what I'm going to try and answer in this video today. You're going to notice that it looks a lot like a Henri. In fact, we already had a Brennus in the game. It was the name used as the test vehicle for the changes to Henri so long ago, when it received a reload booster. That whole line got changed to give it a reload booster. But Brennus is back here, and it's different. It no longer has a reload booster. It has larger caliber guns. That's going to be the main thing here. But let's go over these differences, or actually, let's talk about what's the same. You're going to have the same HP pool, you're going to have the same hull, you're going to have the same detection, you're going to have the same acceleration, which did get buffed recently, so you're going to notice that we're relatively maneuverable again. You're able to dodge incoming battleship salvos much more like old Henri again. Henri was very difficult to hit back in the day, and then they nerfed its acceleration massively. And now it's back, and so is Brennus. It gets the same exact acceleration. We also get the same rudder shift, turning radius, and all repair values and fire resistances. Onto the main battery here, this is where the key differences are going to be. Henri has 240mm main guns, which give you some pretty nice HE and AP. Decent pen and a ton of fire chance. Henri is an incredible farmer. Brennus here gets 305mm guns, so much higher caliber, much more like those on battle cruisers that we find. And yet, it still retains cruiser dispersion. As you all probably know by now, I'm not a huge fan of battle cruisers. I really don't like how bad the dispersion feels relative to cruiser main guns, and the power level isn't high enough that it feels like you're playing a battleship. And you're going to notice that here, we're going to shatter a lot on battleships at longer ranges. You can't go for Citadels against battleships at long range. You got to aim for upper belts and get good damage. But against cruisers, well, your Citadels are going to do quite the damage. It's very, very good here against cruisers. And so is Henri, to be fair. But crucially, we don't have that reload booster, and I think that's a key weak point on the Brennus. But back to these main guns, you get a little bit more range, 20.3 kilometers base, slightly longer reload, not by much though, 13.5 second reload base versus a 13-second reload on the Henri. And your flight times are quite a bit better, so out to, let's say, 15 kilometers, your AP has a 7.6 second travel time. Henri's AP has an 8.4 second travel time, so it's going to be much easier to lead this ship than the Henri. That's a really nice thing to have. HE is going to be 9 seconds on the Henri, where the Brennus has 7.4 seconds, so an even bigger difference there. Much easier to lead targets with the Brennus than the Henri. Although you only have 7 guns, you don't actually have the full 9 guns, unfortunately. So that means our DPM here is actually going to be a little bit worse than Henri with HE, and slightly better with the armor piercing thanks to the alpha damage increase. But again, no reload booster, which is going to be a key weakness of this Brennus here. Henri gets massive value out of its reload booster, not only with AP, but also high explosive. Cruiser goes broadside to you, you pop your reload booster, and you slap them for some Citadels. Brennus will also get those Citadels, but you don't have the booster to get more consistency out of it through just volume of fire. The other thing with HE here is anytime you get a fire and a battleship uses its damage control, you pop your reload booster and you're pretty much guaranteed the follow-up permanent fires. So in the time I've spent with the Brennus here, that's the key that I felt like I was missing most of all coming from Henri. I've played it again relatively recently thanks to that buff. I really felt like I was missing that reload booster. It's really fun to use and a key part of the Henri playstyle. So Brennus lacking that is a little bit disappointing. But you get larger caliber guns. So let's talk about the shells you get here. Relative to Henri, let's stay at 15 kilometers, let's say. Your pen is way higher. You have 403mm of pen at 15 kilometers. Not enough for tier 10 battleships at these longer ranges, but at 10 kilometers, 13 kilometers, you're going to start to get those Citadels into battleships, which is really cool. Henri, of course, has 292 millimeters of pen on that AP at 15 kilometers. That's still more than enough for cruisers, just to keep in mind. That's why you're not really going to notice much of a difference at those longer ranges with that AP getting Citadels into cruisers, at least when it comes to pen. Overmatch, you get up to 21 millimeters of overmatch. It's not a major threshold in my opinion. Henri still gets 16 millimeters, which is a major threshold for light cruisers. That allows you to overmatch most of Minotaur, Colbert, Smolensk armor, and then you just aim for Citadels and you get them at almost any angle if you get a little bit lucky. So Brennus retaining that overmatch is nice. Your ricochet angles are the same, which is to say they're standard ricochet angles. No improved AP pen here like a Des Moines or Petro, for example, or even Stalingrad. The threshold here for arming the AP is 51 millimeters though, so that might come into effect on some lighter armored ships, I'm not entirely sure. And the fuse times are going to be the same. But damage is where we get the benefits. 6,200 alpha on Henri, which is respectable. But Brennus gets 8,700, much closer to that of battlecruisers or even small caliber battleships. So that's where you're going to just absolutely crush people when you get those Citadels. But you only have 7 shells and no reload booster, so I think you're going to lack a little bit of consistency there. You're going to hit a little bit harder when you connect, but lack a bit of consistency relative to Henri and its AP. Now, before I talk about the high explosive shells, this is a perfect opportunity to talk about the general maneuverability and utility of Brennus. Having this improved acceleration is really, really nice. This engine boost is absolutely incredible. It's going to allow us to do some decent dodging here at closer ranges, but you'll notice consumable-wise, we also are lacking a hydro or that defensive fire. So anytime we're at close range with subs, which we don't want to be, but if we are, we still can't spot them. That's really, really disappointing. And that's a very niche scenario, I suppose, but also dodging incoming torpedoes. You don't have that hydro as a warning. Pretty unfortunate that we're not only lacking that reload booster, but we're also lacking that hydro or defensive fire, whatever you would choose on the Henri. Also, the Marseille just has those consumables as well, so if you want that larger caliber gun experience on a French cruiser, Marseille exists, right? It has even larger caliber guns, the AP is going to hit even harder, and have a little bit more pen as well, while retaining a reload booster. Although it's got battle cruiser dispersion, not cruiser dispersion. So that's your difference there. You're going to have to decide, is it worth giving up a reload booster, and more minorly, I suppose, a hydro? Nice to dodge these torps here, though, with, well, most of them, with this engine boost allowing us to slow down rather quickly. But Marseille covers that battle cruiser higher caliber gun role, where Henri covers that cruiser role with still respectable AP and is able to farm much better. So for this ship to be 60,000 research points and not really bring much unique to the table, in my opinion, I don't really see it. I don't really see it, I guess. Maybe if it had that reload booster still, we could talk, but I think that is just not quite enough. It loses that unique playstyle of these French cruisers just a little bit. That reload booster is key. But you'll have to let me know what you think about that in the comments down below. I could be being too hard on the Brennus here. I am known to not enjoy the battle cruiser playstyle as much, so maybe I'm overvaluing Henri just by personal preference and bias there. But onwards to our high explosive shells, and notice that we're lacking a hydro here as we move forward. The high explosive is actually pretty good. I want to mention that it pens 51 millimeters. Now, what can we think that came out recently that has 51 millimeters of armor and is incredibly tanky and difficult to kill and is incredibly powerful right now? Yeah, that's that Libertad line, isn't it? Kind of interesting that the patch after those go into early access, we get a long-range cruiser that can spam high explosive that pens them. Now, I'm not saying this is enough to counter them, okay? That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying, it's the pendulum swing that I've been talking about, where we get the insane tanky, overpowered battleship, and then we swing back the other way, and suddenly cruisers get the pen damage range to deal with them. And then we swing back and get a new battleship that is insane and difficult to deal with. It's a bit of a pendulum back and forth, and that's just natural power creep when it comes to a live service game that's nearly 10 years old at this point. But back to this high explosive, the alpha damage is pretty nice. 4,250 alpha damage versus Henri's 3,400. which in itself is very respectable for tier 10 HE. Henri hits incredibly hard with its high explosive, and this hits even harder. Marseille does get 4800, but it's pretty close. And crucially, we have that shell velocity. Even at 19 kilometers, we don't have to lead all that much for this Vermont. Vermont's a little slow, fair enough, but it's really noticeable, the shell velocity difference on the high explosive. Henri HE is just very slow and difficult to lead. Fire chance wise, we have a 25% fire chance versus Henri's 22. Marseille gets 35%, but that ship has a much longer reload, so comparing them is a little bit harder when it comes to that. But Henri and Brennus having very similar reloads like this, well, that fire chance is pretty nice. Slightly fewer guns, higher fire chance, higher damage, better shell velocity, looks pretty good. But again, we're lacking that reload booster. I'm sorry to keep bringing it up. Maybe I am overvaluing that reload booster, but to me, that's really what sets Henri apart and makes it so enjoyable to play, alongside just being insanely fast and maneuverable as a hull. Torps-wise, we're actually slightly different. You get double the amount of torpedoes here. Pretty cool. 9 kilometers of range still the same damage output, but you get double the amount. So instead of a lifeboat in one of the little portholes, I suppose, you get a second torp launcher, which is pretty cool per side. And it's not going to be the most useful thing in the world, since Henri doesn't really want to get all that close. Sorry, Brennus doesn't really want to get all that close, thanks to having 30 millimeters of armor. Still a Henri hull here after all. You got a bit of black hole armor, but there's a ton of 30 mil overmatch these days, let's be honest. And it's pretty difficult to get close in a ship that's this large, covered with so little armor. But that spaced armor is nice for black hole armor. You retain that kind of signature Henri black hole armor that Henri introduced to the game. We've actually managed to come back, talking about this game real quick. We've made a comeback here with our team, thankfully, and we've just run off the map and accept victory at this point. Decided to go for the Cub at the end here to try and help our DD stay alive, or at least trade that out, retain the cap advantage. The Sub and Thunderer chased our friendly Thunderer too far to the corner of the map to really have any impact at the end of the game. Thanks to our Ohio, Thunderer, and Regulo, they helped us win this game. Feels good, man, to come back, and that's a really close match into this early one. This was my first game in the ship, by the way, so you'll notice I was playing a little bit passive. Haven't really gotten to the grips with what the ship is capable of yet. Wanted to make sure I got some good time in with these main guns and understood the shell velocity differences. That's a big part of this ship. Now on to the second game I have for you here. I've changed up the build a little bit. The first one, I was going for a more standard, neutral, normal build. Well, considering it's a Henri with different guns, well, you know that we gotta try the Lighthouse build. We don't have ourselves the leg mod for Henri, but that's okay. We still have some very powerful guns, and we can still run a Lighthouse build. This involves giving up all concealment for any upgrades that increase our damage or maneuverability. Crucially, that gives us like a 6-second rudder shift, and you're going to notice that is very useful here. Alongside the speed boost, you're very difficult to hit again. That's that Henri buff coming into play. Also, if you're kiting like this at the back of the map, you are going to notice something about these turret angles. Very comfortable turret angles when you're kiting. 25 degrees to be specific. Very well angled. You still have to worry about overmatch, of course. You're still wanting to dodge the shells, but you're very well angled and still able to shoot all of your guns. Forward, though, it's 35 degrees, so quite a bit worse. Definitely set up to be a kiting ship. And compared to Henri, though, we should talk about that as well. Henri has 36 degrees when looking forward and 30 degrees backwards. So basically the same when you're pushing in, but kiting, you're 5 degrees better. That's really nice. Makes the ship just a little bit more comfortable to play. That extra pen isn't going to help us that much against the Petro as far as the high explosive pen goes. Henri already pens 40 with its HE, so we already would have penned Petro. It's one of the nice advantages there. But against some battleships at higher tier, that 51 millimeters of pen will come into handy. Certainly that Libertad. But another difference is actually we have worse AA. Our AA is worse than Henri. Henri's not known for having good AA to begin with, let's be honest. But it's actually worse on the Brennus, unfortunately. Alongside not even having the option of running a defensive fire, which feels a little bit bad. So you're really going to want to stay away from carriers, or if they decide to come strike you, just go hide with your teammates. At least you have the range to still do some damage from those farther distances. And that's really about it for the differences. Kind of last on this consumables page again, and it feels bad still not to have a hydro or defire option, and certainly to not have that reload booster. I really, really wish this ship had that reload booster. I'm not sure what else it would have had to give up for Wargaming to feel like that was a balanced ship. To me, it seems like losing 2 guns over Henri is kind of giving up enough. Maybe it would have done with shell velocity. Maybe the shell velocity was a little bit worse. Give it a reload booster. Personally, I would have enjoyed that much more. But I can see this being a nice ship to get if you're someone who wants to play that Henri playstyle, but you don't like how floaty those shells are, because they are very floaty at longer ranges, difficult to lead. So maybe then this is a decent option for you. You could run this as this kiting build and get decent value, but I mean, for me, I just really, really value that reload booster. This Kremlin here having a pretty tough time hitting us. One battleship shooting at you whenever you're in this Henri Brennus hull. It's pretty hard for that battleship to do anything if you know what you're doing with dodges, because I mean, look at how badly he's gonna miss us here. To no fault of his own, really, but look at how much distance we're able to cover in the time it takes for his shells to be fired and then land in the water here. It's really, really hard to hit up Henri or Brennus at these longer ranges. Still here using the HE, but Petro goes broadside. So now we swap over to that armor piercing. And at longer ranges, you can still hit Citadels on these Petros or any cruiser. And that's really how I would suggest you play this ship. Play it a little bit more passive to start with. Try and use island cover if you're not as good in open water. Spam that HE at people, and then when they give up and turn broadside, that's when you swap over to that armor piercing, and then hopefully you're going to get those Citadels. And I'm sorry, I'm going to do it again. We're going to go back to not having a reload booster one more time. I mean, I'll probably talk about it in the build section anyway, so a couple more times, but having a reload booster is pretty nice when somebody turns out broadside to you. Yeah, it's the one thing I wish this ship had, I suppose. Even the 7 guns I haven't found to be too bad. Typically, you'll know me as well to not enjoy battleship 6 guns, even cruiser 6 guns, things like Tulsa. Not a huge fan of. The consistency is just way down when you don't have the shell volume to deal with dispersion in this game. But I didn't really find the 7 guns to be too bad. I mean, some of these salvos are kind of weak when you miss, or maybe that's just my aim, right? But it wasn't too bad thanks to cruiser dispersion and just the absurdly high alpha damage on these guns. It's just that burst, man. It's so crucial to this playstyle. It felt like I was just missing a little something. And maybe that's because I've played too much Henri, or I've enjoyed Henri too much in the past. I do enjoy that ship quite a lot. But if you're looking for this playstyle, 60,000 research points, just grind a Henri. Just grind a Henri. Or if you want the bigger AP hits and you don't mind having a little worse dispersion, just get a Marseille. That would be my recommendation over this thing. To me, this feels like a bit of a non-starter. Maybe if they change it in the future, but I don't know if they'll do that. But that is going to do it for this game. Not a lot happened. They farmed a lot of buffs, so you can imagine what happened to our team in this one. And don't worry, tomorrow we will definitely be taking a look at the Hildebrand. Personally, I was just more interested in the Brennus, as I do enjoy Henri quite a bit, and you don't have to gamble to get it, where Hildebrand is... Whew, that is quite the gambling you got to do to get that thing. But as for the builds here on this ship, yeah, the Lighthouse was pretty interesting, but, you know, it's difficult to play anytime you're running a build like this, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, especially if you're newer to the Henri playstyle. I went something like this as a more standard build, I believe. Something like that, where you do still have some pretty decent concealment. You get the 4th heal, the 4th speed boost. This is going to help extend your speed boost. That's really your lifeline as well, especially if you're not running the Lighthouse build. Your maneuverability with the Lighthouse is 6.7 seconds, which is kind of insane. I suppose I didn't really show the full pain here. Actually, it's not even 16. You're taking skills like heavy HE. 18.4 is your detection with the Lighthouse build. It's pretty rough. But to put this normal build, I suppose, back on it, so I can just show that as well. It's a little bit easier to play when you have like 13-kilometer detect. I'm running the steering gears upgrade for lighthouse build, just like this, and then propulsion. So that's going to give you some really nice dodging capability thanks to 6.7 second rudder shift. We're pretty quick, and this propulsion and engine boost, which is 20%, is very, very nice. Notice how long it lasts and the cooldown time. It's kind of ridiculous. That is with the module and commander skill though too, so keep that in mind. It won't quite last that long, but it's nice to have that long duration engine boost. As for the more standard build, this is what I went with here. So 11.2, pretty sluggish rudder shift there. You definitely will be using your concealment more to not take as many greedy engagements in open water, but you can still do it when your engine boost is available. Armor-wise, it's still just a Henri, so 25 bow stern, 30 mil deck and upper belt armor. And then the crucial signature that is the Henri armor is this black hole armor, or just spaced plating. So you get 30 on the outside, which will arm some shells. They have to get through that. Then they have to get through your standard armor belt, which is 140, which is going to arm any AP. And then they have to get through 45 yet. So you have one chance. I mean, depending on the battle, you know, if it's a battleship, it's just going to go right through the 30. It's really going to ignore that fuse threshold there. But against some cruisers, it will have 2 spaced armor platings to actually have auto bounce checks. So that's what happens if you hit a Henri in the Citadel and you're at an angle like this perhaps, and you don't get any damage. It gets through the first plating perhaps, but then it bounces off the second one and explodes in this little cavity, and you do 0 damage. That is the black hole armor. That's the spaced armor in this game. It's a questionable game mechanic in my opinion. But it certainly is an advantage of this ship. And that's going to do it for the Brennus. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Still, just to put it very bluntly, not going to recommend this one. Maybe if things change in the future, it's just too expensive for a ship that is too similar to either Henri or Marseille. And both those ships have a reload booster, which make them much more fun to play in my opinion. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.